Welcome to the Resilient Rehab Podcast. I'm your host, Alex Effer. And today we're going to be talking about swayback posture and its association with having this pooched belly. And so it's important to understand that, again, posture is a dynamic thing. If we see somebody who is holding a certain posture, that is a reflection of movement or their inability to move in a certain way. And swayback posture, which is a term, swayback posture, rib flares, shoulder hikes, rounded shoulders, all of these will fall underneath that category of some kind of movement limitation or an inability to move in a certain way. And so when we're taking a look at a swayback posture, it's important to identify what it is. So swayback posture is essentially, if you think of somebody who has a forward head, rounded shoulders, their chest is collapsed or their sternum is depressed, and it looks like their hips are kind of in front of them. So it looks like they're crunching. They have this kyphosis or this roundness in their thoracic spine. It looks like their thoracic spine is flexing, which it isn't, which is why one of the strategies that a lot of people give is to go on top of a foam roller and try to bend over it to try to reduce the bend. And in fact, it's actually an extension of the spine. It's just what happens is our center of gravity goes so far forward towards our toes that we have used a strategy, maybe like a rib flare, that's pushed us forward and we're trying to bend ourselves back, but we keep on repeating the position and the movement. So our center of gravity keeps on going more and more forward to a point where we're going to fall over on our toes. And so what we do is we just collapse everything. And we kind of do that to bring ourselves back because everything is going forward. So I need to do something to pull me back. And so what tends to happen is my sternum will get pulled down because there is a muscle that attaches to the base of the sternum. And I'm holding a pelvis model. So in case you're watching this or in case you're listening to this, you may not be able to see it, so I'll try to explain it so you can visualize it. But you can see it on the video on my YouTube page. So what happens is the sternum will attach the top part of the pelvis, the front of the pelvis, and the bottom part of the sternum. And when it contracts and gets stiff, it will pull the pelvis under. So it's going to kind of do this posterior orientation or this rolling back of the pelvis, which creates this flexion in the lumbar spine. And what happens is because the rectus pulls forward, the glutes get even more squeezed. So I have this really flat butt. You have this pulling back of the pelvis, this rounding of the pelvis, which is why when you see these people squat or bend over, touch their toes, it really looks like they're rounding their back, because all the space in the back of the pelvis is now gone because of all this tension. And so I've got the sternum being pulled down. So now that pulls my shoulders forward. I then also have pelvis that is kind of being pulled forward and rolling back. And so now I'm going to have to create these other positions elsewhere in order to keep me back. So my sternum goes down, that's going to push me back. Well, now I'm going to fall back towards my heel. So what am I going to do? I'm going to push my head forward. So I push my head forward to counterbalance that. That pulls me forward again. Then I'm going to round my lumbar spine. That pulls me back. My pelvis goes forward. That pushes me forward. My knees hyperextend. That pulls me back. So it's this constant pushing forward and back to level myself, because if I push myself too far forward, I have to round something to come back. If I push myself too far back, I have to extend something to push myself forward. And so it's this constant balance of this. But essentially, from a higher level view, the swayback posture, again, that's going to reflect this forward head, rounded shoulders, collapsed chest, and this this lumbar flexion in the lumbar spine, the lower back. That's going to be reflective of the swayback posture. So you think these people are slouching. And, a non-longer form posture of this swayback is slouching. People could slouch at their desk. Doesn't mean that they're going to stand up stuck in a slouch position, right? So It has to do with somebody who holds a lot of tension. And why do these people, another reason why these people also push their head forward is because if everything is collapsed, I'm not going to be able to breathe. When I take an inhale, I have all this tension in the upper part of my rib cage. I'm not going to be able to expand it. So if you've ever taken a CPR course, one of the things they teach you is to tilt the head back and pull the chin up. And what that will do is that opens up the airway, because the rectus abdominis attaches to the lower part, that six-pack muscle attaches to the lower part of the sternum, and will continue along the sternum, which, if I didn't mention before, the sternum is just the chest bone. That muscle will continue through fascia and other tissue to go up towards the base of my neck in the front part. So basically like right where the bony part, the top of my sternum is. And now we have other muscles that also attach there that are then going to continue up towards my jaw. So I have this line from my pelvis along my rib cage, along my stomach, along my sternum, towards my jaw, that's going to pull everything down. So think the entire front of the body just does a crunch. Even the neck does a crunch. Well, if I tuck my chin, that is going to close the airway. So if I want to open up that airway, the only thing I could do is push my head forward, because that is going to extend my cervical spine, my neck, and that is going to open up the airway. So now I've got this position. I've got an airway that is now compensatorily open. It's not really a great strategy because I'm still not able to fill up my upper lungs. I now have my chest that's compressed. I have my shoulders rounding forward. So think of like my levator muscles, the muscles that are at there's not the traps, but there are also muscles that lift up the scapula. Those are tilting the scapula forward, an anterior tilt of the scapula. And then I've got my pelvis being shooted forward. Now, when this happens, I have this position. Well, if my butt gets pushed forward, my pelvis gets pushed forward and rolls back, it's going to look like I have this pooched belly, because now what's happening is not just my stomach just looks like it's being compressed, but also the internal organs are kind of falling out. And so they're kind of pushing towards that stomach. And so that's going to appear to have this lower pooch of the belly. A lot of people will look at their belly and they'll see it looks like there's an indentation at their belly button, and below it's this kind of like protruding of the belly. Now, one of the reasons why this could happen is because of this position. If my six-pack is crunching and everything's going forward, well then basically things are going to spill outside of the bowl, and that's being our internal organs as being one of them. Now, I'm not sitting here saying that, oh, anybody who has a little bit of belly fat, it's your organ, so do this. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that I have seen, and in my experience, I have improved that with some people, especially people who have like 6% body fat, 8%, 10% body fat with a six-pack showing. And they still have this pooch. They're like, no matter what I can do, I can't get rid of this lower part of the abs or this lower pooching of the belly. And you look at them and it's like, okay, well, their posture is this swayback position. So, okay, well, yes, they've got all this leanness and they have their six-pack, but maybe instead of trying to do exercise to try to hit the abs more and more and more, which is what commonly people will do, maybe let's have a different strategy. Let's try to reposition things and see what happens. So again, the pooch belly looks like body fat, but it may not be. And so another way to visualize this is think of our lungs as like a water bottle. When I exhale everything, that water bottle is empty. Think of air as being fluid, as being water. Okay, so I've got this empty water bottle and I pour water into the water bottle as I inhale. But wherever there is tension, that is the empty part of the water bottle. So maybe I pour the water and it goes to the bottom part of the bottle. It starts at the bottom and makes its way up towards the top. Well, if my sternum is collapsed and compressed, my shoulders are rounded forward, so my pecs are tight with air quotations. There's stiffness there. But remember, muscles are reactionary, so let's keep that in mind. If I have that, then maybe I can only fill the water bottle up a quarter of the way, because that air or that space that is unoccupied by the water, that's where my tension is, that's where my compression is. And so this has to do with the strategies in order to overcome this. So now I've got this empty water bottle until the bottom, because the fluid is at the bottom, right? And that's going to be similar to this lower rib cage occupying, or this lower part of the lungs occupying water. Well, if I want to get the water to the top of the bottle, what's an exercise I could do? I can flip them upside down. I could do some type of inversion exercises, right? So when I'm thinking about strategies in order to overcome the sway back position, I'm thinking about they're so tense that laying them on their back and getting them to use their arms to reach or to press their feet in the ground, they're just going to compress everything. So when they reach their arms, they're just going to compress their sternum more. When they lay on their back, they're just going to crunch even more, right? If they lay on their side, that could be an effective strategy, right? Because one of the muscles that overcomes this six-pack tightness is the external obliques. So side lying could be an option. There is more to it than that when it comes to side lying, which I talk a lot about in my Evolved Biomechanics mentorship. But for the purpose of this, side lying is great in order to improve this external oblique, in order to downregulate that rectus. But inversion is a great strategy because, again, it gets the air to the upper part of the rib cage and starts to expand that upper part of the rib cage to hopefully bring the shoulders back. Now, squeezing the shoulder blades together is not going to do anything for these people, because if I squeeze my shoulder blades together, I push myself forward. But isn't the reason why they're there because their center of gravity is so forward? So why would I want to do things to push them back, right? It seems counterintuitive, but what we actually want to do is expand in between their shoulder blades. And when I say expand in between the shoulder blades, we're talking about flexion. But they're already flexed, their spine's already flexed. Again, that spinal flexion, it only looks like spinal flexion because the sternum is compressing. They actually have, think of them as being in a rib flared position and then they pulled everything down the front. So it's this extended spine that then gets bent because of the sternum. It's not an actual segmental flexion. So if we want to improve this position, we have to downregulate the rectus abdominis, probably getting those external obliques activated. We also want to get air, instead of being pooling at the bottom, start to make it go its way up to the top, so we can start to expand this upper part of the region of the rib cage. And we want to do things that start to reduce tension in between the shoulder blades that's pushing us forward, right? So I want to expand my chest and I want to expand in between my shoulder blades. And what you'll find is if you can do this, and again, it may take some time, but if you can get these people back into that position, you'll see their head go back. We don't want to do the chin tucks with these people because, again, that closes their airway. We want to get them in a position that allows them to expand their rib cage in multiple directions so we can reduce tension. And therefore, if there's less tension, our center of gravity doesn't get pushed forward so much. So, reduce tension to the rectus abdominis. Get those external obliques facilitated. Create a shape of the rib cage that allows for us to shift our center of gravity back. That means opening up the chest, opening up the back, and doing exercises that allow for some degree of rotation so that I can get restore this more dynamic rib cage. And potentially some exercise strategies or some ideas of exercise strategies that we can use in order to improve this. Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, save, and share, and I will see you next time.